Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our live learning session for this afternoon. In a moment, I'm going to welcome our two incredible guests to chat to us about a topic that's actually really important to me, which is this divide that exists between entrepreneurship, pathways, and potentially pursuing education after school. I know it's going to be a really lively conversation that I'm really looking forward to. In the meantime, I'd really love to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we live, work, and play, and just acknowledge, I guess, that today we're going to talk a lot about innovation and a lot about new and a lot about next. But actually, I believe that the best innovations come from deeply understanding our past. So normally I'd be coming to you from Brisbane and Yagara and Turrbal land, but today I'm actually coming to you from Ghana land. I'm in South Australia working with some incredible schools. So to kick off, I'd love for you to drop in the chat, where are you coming to us from? What lands are you joining us from today? I know we've kind of got people jumping in from everywhere. So let's take a second and drop into the chat and introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, where you're coming to us from, and potentially a curious question that you've got about today's conversation that you might like to share as well. My name is Dyson. I am the founder of Future Anything, and we're a company that exists to enable spaces for teachers and students to launch enterprising ideas that make the world a better place. For a long time, we'd really branded ourselves around the notion of entrepreneurship education. But what I'm really interested in at the moment is how we build enterprising young people. And by enterprising, I mean young people that have an energetic and independent spirit and a readiness to act. And so I think we're going to dig a little bit into that today, the notion of entrepreneurship and kind of this notion of building enterprising young people as well. So I'd really love to welcome our two guests today. So I'll invite them to flick their cameras on so that we can see their beautiful faces. Welcome to Rowena and also to Murray. It's such a joy to have you both here. We're actually all three of us in 3 states right now. So we're literally covering half of Australia in our conversation, which just occurred to me at the moment. I actually want to kick off by showing something which I think is pretty great. Normally in these sessions, I show photos of myself as a young person and kind of talk about how education might have changed since this day. But in a fun turn of events, we've actually got photos of both of you when you were younger. I mean, look at those faces.
Look at those knees. Oh.
Boys.
Murray, I'll start with you. I'd love to know, tell me about Murray in this go-kart. What kind of student was he? What was education like for you at this point in time?
I was a bad student. It might not surprise anyone that knows me to know that. But I had wonderful parents and I had entrepreneurial parents that would sit me on the side of the road and give me water tanks. And they would say, "Muzz, try and sell these water tanks to people as they go past on the street. And that's your pocket money." And there's a lot of things like that where my parents were pushing me to try things that I wouldn't otherwise try. So God bless my parents.
Oh, that's so great. And obviously an avid go-karter. Were you like, did you love the speed or were you really about like the safety with the helmet? What kind of go-kart rider were you?
It's a wonder any of us survived the 80s. Like the things that my parents let me do that I would never let my kids do today. But yeah, somehow people survived. And so yeah, I think more of a thrill seeker. Kids are a lot more protected these days than they were back then.
That's true. Yeah, definitely. I remember also being a kid and the things that I was allowed to do definitely being very different to what's okay now. Rowena, tell us about you and your knees. What were you like as a young person? I believe this is year 12.
Yes.
Tell me about Rowena in year 12. Were you like the studious, hardworking, dedicated young person, or were you the troublemaker I know you to be now? Which one was it?
Well, yeah, this was year 12 at a country high school in southeast Victoria. There were 15 of us who in year 12, and 3 of us went to university. I was the school captain. Yeah, very, very smart. And I was
The pressure.
a studious young thing as well. But I can tell you, I could not wait for the moment where I could get up off that seat and head off into the world, which was pretty much what I did the moment I could, and enrolled at the first university that I ever went to. The day I went to a university was the day I enrolled at one, and it was just enough to get out of the country. But yeah, I studied, in high school. I loved maths. I hated science. I loved English. And I ended up becoming a maths and English teacher for a while. But, there was a troublesome streak in amongst all of that.
I love that you picked like the dividing wall as subjects too. Like my combination as a teacher is English and PE, which is quite an unusual combination. Your subject combination is quite a unique combination too. Like normally you sit on the math science of the fence, or you sit on the English side of the fence. Never shall the two collide together. The departments sit on opposite sides of the school. What was it like as an early career teacher navigating those two staff rooms, because they're very different places to be?
Yeah, they are. Yes, the school that I worked at, the English teachers sat at the big table close to the tea and coffee, and the maths teachers and the science teachers sat up the back of the staff room. But it was interesting. I went to Monash Uni and I enrolled in a Bachelor of Science degree, and I did, maths, more maths, physics, geology. And at the end of my first year, I got a P2 pass for physics, which these things don't exist anymore. Basically, you pass, but do not come back. It's just not good enough. And I met with, I think it was the dean at the time, and they said, well, what are you actually interested in? And I said, I really love reading. I love reading. And she said, well, go and study some English. Go and do literature. So I ended up with a science degree with a major in pure and applied maths and a minor in English literature. Yeah.
That is a mighty combination. You and I are different people, because I started the science degree and then went, oh my gosh, I can't do this, and packed a bag and went overseas. So yeah, that's such an interesting combination. Let's stay with you for a second, Rowena, and talk us through from that early career teacher through to now. I'm not going to read a bio. Anybody who knows me knows I hate a bio read. But maybe fill us in on how you went from there to where you are now, and tell us a little bit about your role at QUT and kind of the portfolio of work that you're leading in that tertiary space now, when you get to that chronological part of the story.
Yeah, okay. When I started teaching, it was the early 90s in Victoria, and it was the heyday of industrial action. We had two different unions, one for secondary teachers and one for tech teachers. And I worked at a school which was a VCE demonstration school. And so we had tech teachers and secondary teachers together. And being the radical young lefty that I was, I challenged the guys who were leading the union, and ended up in my first year of teaching leading the union, knowing not a thing about what we were doing, but hanging around enough other interesting leftists to understand a little bit, but not a lot. I got sick in my second year of teaching and decided it just literally was not for me. I was not cut out to be in a classroom in that way. And so I looked at, again, what was I interested in? I'd been on a trade union training course to try to understand what I was asking all the other teachers to do. And I'd met some other people who talked with such passion about their work, despite objectively their work not being it wouldn't be seen as rewarding. So in particular, there was a cleaner who talked about her work with such passion and enthusiasm, such motivation, such interest. And that made me think, well, I need to go back to uni and I need to understand more about work. And so I started studying industrial relations. So I went back to uni. I ended up with a PhD in industrial relations, worked in a bunch of different universities. And over time, my interests have moved from understanding work in particularly smaller firms to a move to work in entrepreneurial organizations, because that's really interesting, because you've only got the founder, you have no history. So how does work get organized? How does it get managed? How does it get sorted? How does it get formalized? What sort of processes come into play? The founder plays a key role. So through that, that interest in entrepreneurship, I've ended up at QUT. I was there originally as the head of the School of Management. So all that time I've sort of moved up through academic ranks, head of the School of Management. With that interest in entrepreneurship, and at QUT, we had the particular research expertise around entrepreneurship in the Australian Centre for Entrepreneurship Research. But it was really through the students. They'd come to me and say, this is, 6 or 7 years ago, they'd come to me and say, Rowena, there's all this stuff happening out in Brisbane. River City Labs, there's startup weekends, there's hackathons, there's all sorts of things going on, but where is it at the university? We can't see any of that at the university. We teach it, and we taught entrepreneurship in the School of Management, and I can tell you it was entrepreneurship as a business plan. Write it, put it down, and that's it. It's like, exciting. So I got involved and started to work out what was happening in the entrepreneurial world in Queensland, in Brisbane in particular. And through that sort of, challenged and pushed and prodded and got things happening at QUT to support students on their entrepreneurial journeys. And so over time, that has translated into the role as Pro-Vice-Chancellor Entrepreneurship. So my job is literally to create the environment for entrepreneurial action at QUT amongst our 53,000 students. So, it's as nebulous as that, and it's as fun as that.
My favorite part of what you said then is that you were talking about the founder having processes, and inside I was laughing at the fact that most founders have a complete lack of processes at all. So it's like that's the magic, is how to get a founder to develop processes.
And particularly on managing people. The research shows that a founder will do all sorts of things. They'll get their production, distribution, sales, marketing, all those things in place, and then they will formalize the HR stuff. That's about 10 years in when it starts to happen. It's like you've got 10 years of actually paying people or organizing people. You've already got a culture in place, so it's a little bit too late to wait.
Sometimes I feel like we have these live learning sessions and they're my private therapy sessions, and I suspect that this one might sort of play into that area. Murray, I'm going to throw to you. From the thrill seeker in the go-kart to present day, walk us through a little bit of you and some of the work that you lead now.
Okay, and I'll just say sorry for the background noise. The door's going to close in a second. This is the thing. So school was interesting, but I was always doing things around the place. I was the nerdiest person you can possibly imagine. Like, think of the nerdiest nerd you know as a kid, and me turning up at school with listings, printouts of code that I had written to double check in the corner by myself. That was me. But figuring out how to sell different things online and just make money in different ways. I started writing a bit of software when I was 16. That was an ad blocking product. Just because I thought that was fun. I wanted to see if it worked. I set up a little website, and then people started paying on that website for it. And so it was terrible, but because people were paying for it, it gave me a reason to make it better. It's wonderful when you can see your little RegSoft or whatever payment processor you're using, PayPal, whatever people use these days, of just money arriving and you going, that's a thing. I should figure that out. And then that happening enough, and it was entirely lucky that I stumbled across something that people actually wanted and had a viral spread to it. So the marketing component was non-existent. People would tell other people about it. And then that going on for a little while, me thinking I was a little hotshot 16, 17-year-old dropping out of high school because I thought I was making enough money to not kind of need the stuff that I was doing at school. And then that company went for 14 years after that, 15 years. And for all of that time, I was working with people overseas. So it was just me in Australia on a laptop, wherever I had internet. I ended up traveling around the world a lot and like following the Formula One around the world, for example. That was fun. But it turned me into a slightly strange person with a really strong affinity for this creating your own job. And if someone as silly as me can just beaver away and figure out, okay, technology is enabling a lot of solutions that didn't exist before to be made by someone like me, and for those solutions to be made available to the world in a way that wasn't possible before, why are more people not seeing that as a normal thing? And so since then, I put some money and time into Startup Muster being started, so the biggest survey of startups across Australia. And that was on the premise that if you understand the industry better, it can be better supported. Was CEO of Fishburners for a while, so that went from 100 desks in Sydney to 750 across Sydney, Brisbane, and Shanghai. Brisbane was my favorite. Brisbane is freaking amazing. It's as a place to operate, it is incredible. But anyway, was at Westpac for a while running their accelerator. In the last 4 years, I've been director of entrepreneurship at UTS. UTS is amazing, as is QUT. I'd say QUT is more amazing. But in terms of what you're able to do,
I love this collegiality conversation. This is the best.
It's true. You've been doing this a lot longer and better than we have.
No, we just do it differently. That's all. That's all.
All right, let's agree to disagree. But the things you can get away with in a university that you can't do in other places, and the responsibility you have, like what is the future relevance of a university? If it's just educating people in what they signed up for, that's nice. And if you have a good reputation around how you do that, that's probably sustainable. But I think long-term, the economic contribution of universities and the society that they support around them is what will keep them relevant and supported by the society around them in the future. So that's why we get to do what we do.
I want to dig in there actually, because I think like we know COVID has transformed the way we do learning and life in general. And I think, you know, I was only speaking today with teachers around, we have this frame around the future of work, but really we're just talking about work now, because a lot of the things that we were projecting 5 years ago that might have happened in 15 happened within 3 years with the pandemic. So there has been this radical shift, I think, not only in what people value around work, but also how we do work and life and learning. And schools have obviously seen a significant shift, but I think potentially the tertiary institutions have had a massive shake-up in the last couple of years around what their space is within society and how they offer value to learners and to young people. Rowena, I'll start with you first. Tell me, how has the landscape at QUT changed from pre-pandemic to now? What is being a uni student now? How is that different to potentially when I was at QUT doing my teaching degree?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got to say, this semester and our semester started really badly, of course, with the floods. We had to pick up and move the whole semester by a week, which threw everyone into a tiz, particularly students and those who work, because, you know, they booked shifts in and then the whole semester moved on them. So, you know, I think there's a couple of things. This semester, we've seen lots more students back on campus, not necessarily in class, but on campus. So they might not be physically in the classroom, but they
it's the same as when I went to university.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But, you know, they're in the libraries, they're in the foundry spaces, they're hanging out and wherever they might be comfortable and with others. and they are going to class, but they're not physically in the class, particularly for lectures. Tutorials are different because there's always a different sort of engagement in tutorials. So there's a lot of students on campus, and there's quite a good buzz going on. So COVID showed us that we could be supremely flexible and learn in all sorts of different ways. And we're never going to walk back from that. You know, frankly, yeah, you can have online exams. That's even possible. It'd be better if we didn't actually have exams and we had things that were slightly more realistic than exams, but we at least can do them at home or wherever you want to be, rather than sitting in a classroom watching a clock tick. But for us, one of the things which is really quite apparent is that it is the experience of being at university which is most important. You know, you can get content anywhere, and you can get amazing content anywhere. So what is it about what is it about the campus that actually matters, or the campus experience? And I mean that in both the physical and the digital version as well. So we've been building a piece of curriculum at QUT that will be launched in 2024. There's a trial of some of it next year, which is literally all about experience. So it will take all of our undergraduate students, and 2/3 of our students are undergraduates, so there's like 36,000 or so undergraduate students, and we will put them in class together. It won't be, and I say put them in class, well, the first piece that they have to do of these 24 credit points is a festival. So my job is to be director of the festival of learning that we will have. It's a unit that runs over 6 weeks, but there will be a 2-week block of festival where the campuses, and the digital campus as well as the 2 physical campuses, will be taken over by a festival of things. Anything, everything, unimaginable, weird, wonderful things. The learning will be scaffolded around it, but what we're keen to do there is mix people up, put them all together. So put them all together, mix them up, and give them an opportunity to engage with one another, and through participating in weird and wonderful experiences, develop a greater sense of themselves, who they are as people, and then what they will take to the place that they want to go. We then will, there will also be units that follow along behind that. But again, it's not more engineering for engineers or nursing for nurses. It is, you know, big question things, you know, who am I? Why is the world shaped like it is? How do I think? I don't know, all, you know, anything and everything. But pieces that bring people together, mix them up, and through that diversity of experience, they learn together and learn, you know, engage in that learning, which will take them into the world, not with more discipline depth, but hopefully they will take to their discipline more depth of understanding about themselves, and you know, what they're interested in, what matters to them. So, you know, for us, this piece of curriculum is all about students feeling that they belong in the university, that they belong in terms of their social groups. It's about developing their head, so, you know, their mind. So it's, you know, I understand my place in the world. I understand what's possible and how to make things possible. But there will also be units which are highly practical as well, and they'll engage with industry to work on challenges, in diverse groups. So it's about their hands as well. So it's about, your heart, I belong, my head, I know, and my hands, I can do. And that's incredibly important. And it'll sit alongside their discipline studies. But, it's just a different way of learning, and saying learning happens anywhere and everywhere, rather than just in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because you're right. Like, as far as content, I think we can get content anywhere. And if I think back to my own university experience, one of the greatest things that came out of my 4 years was not what I learned, but it was actually who I met. My entire professional network came out of my university cohort. They were the people that I walked into teaching, in my first year and rang when things went really, really badly. And now, like, when I was moving into leadership positions in schools, they became, my network of colleagues across, like, as we spread, throughout Queensland and throughout Australia, they were the foundation of my professional network, so that I would start to understand the profession that I was involved in and the potential that existed beyond that space. Murray, I'll throw to you, because you definitely spoke to this before around, I guess, why universities exist in a post-pandemic world and what they offer communities and society. What's your take on this? In UTS, in a post-pandemic world, what's different, and potentially, like, where is it going?
Yes. Nice, easy question. It makes me feel better about the campus experience, because, like, for so long people were saying, why do we have these campuses? You can do these things online. And then you take the campus away and watch the change of experience of people. And the experience has not been good for the last couple of years for the majority of people that were now remote learning when they didn't want to be. It gives me a new confidence in why campuses actually matter. And instead of, can we retain the online learning components and make those better and better and try and compete internationally, it makes me think, no, there's actually a place for a well-run campus experience where humans get to be humans and interact with each other, and maybe take into account the changes in society in how we're educating people and encouraging people to consider opportunities, but not so much in how we change what we do. If anything, it makes me feel more strongly that how we used to do things was quite nice. And the sooner we can get back to that, the better, because learning in Zoom sessions suck.
Yes, it can be. We all got a little bit zoomed out, I think, over COVID. Definitely.
Unless the content's particularly good. But it's, when you're Zooming with someone that's down the road from you, and you're just doing it because you're not allowed to get into the campus together, that is atrocious.
That's so true. You used a phrase earlier about doing it differently, like at UTS, particularly around entrepreneurship. I'm an educator who works in the entrepreneurship space, and I think maybe one of the greatest barriers in the work that we do within schools is this polarizing perception that young people can either be entrepreneurs or they can engage in education, and that the two are completely separate things. And these stereotypes that we have about your disengaged learner being the entrepreneur and your high achieving student moving on to traditional pathways. And I think this is where I want to dig in here. How do we subvert some of those stereotypes and norms? Tell me about the opportunities that exist at UTS for entrepreneurially minded students. Like, what does that experience look like for you, and what are you creating in that space?
This is really important, and it's kind of nuanced and a bit more complicated than it seems, because we do a lot of work out in schools, as of course you do as well, but the work that we do is targeting year 9 and 10 students with just role modeling. So we don't want to educate anyone in entrepreneurship. We just want to show people like themselves that came from those schools in particular, that are doing something they can do with enablers that they have. And here is someone 10 years older than you that is now running this kind of company, getting these kind of results, and you can do that too. And doing that for 10,000 people a year, and measuring the change in sentiment from people and how they feel about entrepreneurship. We don't have an undergrad entrepreneurship offering at UTS. And I kind of like that, because when we go out to schools, it's not about selling UTS or even kind of skewing preferences towards UTS. It's about creating entrepreneurs. And the people we're sending out do have degrees in areas that are unrelated to entrepreneurship. And for me, that solves the parent problem, which I'm sure you've run into, of why are you encouraging my kids to think about entrepreneurship? It's not a choice. You can study whatever you want to study as a safe set of skills that set you up for a career in whatever. And you can be entrepreneurial while you're in school, while you're at university, during your career, after your career, whatever. It shouldn't be something that people see as a different option, but they need to see examples of here is someone educated that is being entrepreneurial and leveraging those skills, or just being entrepreneurial, for that to be normal.
And so what do those other opportunities exist like at UTS? So if I'm a student and I'm studying another undergrad degree, how do I tap into this kind of ecosystem at UTS?
Okay. So again, the UTS startups thing is a little bit strange. We don't have accelerator programs. We don't have external mentors. What we have is 491 startups that we're supporting at the moment. They're all launched by current or past UTS students, and we support them free of charge. We don't take equity, but we do tell them all, you get all this free space and support and other things, but you need to help us support younger entrepreneurs. So that's the deal that we have. And then we end up with all these people that are being mentors or running workshops or running events or doing other things, so that people can learn from the people they want to become and can actually become. And I like that kind of peer learning experience. And I know other universities do this as well. But the more we can have good entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs that are in our community being supported freely by UTS, but in exchange for them being the people that help these less experienced people, the more authentic that kind of peer learning experience is. And then we can start to do it en masse by this facilitating rather than educating directly. So that's the main support that we have for students, is just connecting them to huge numbers of entrepreneurs that are similar to themselves, but a little bit more developed, and then making sure those people are motivated to provide support to the less experienced ones.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Rowena, I want to throw to you. You used a phrase earlier where you said that, you skimmed over your very fancy title and then basically said that you're responsible for creating the conditions for entrepreneurship at QUT. Tell me about what the conditions are for fostering that in the tertiary sector. And then once you've got the conditions, what do the opportunities look like?
Well, we start at QUT with the view that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond the resources you currently control. So that was a definition of entrepreneurship Howard Stevenson from Harvard Business School came up with in the early 1980s. It doesn't say anything about the type of entrepreneurship. It doesn't say you have to go out and start a tech business. It doesn't say you even have to start a business. It's just you're pursuing an opportunity and you don't have everything you need at that point. And so for us, what that looks like is helping people understand what resources they have available to them, and then what other resources they might need in order to, create whatever they want to do to realize that opportunity. And of course, the key resource they have is themselves. What's in their heart, what's in their mind, what education, what learning, what experience they have, how can that be brought to the problem space that they want to work in, and how can it be brought to life. So we do a lot, the part of the university I lead, QUT Entrepreneurship, we do a lot, we operate in the extracurricular space. It's all voluntary for students anywhere across the university, and doesn't matter if they're undergraduates or PhDs. So we, our purpose is to empower individuals on their entrepreneurial journey through programs, events, and mentoring. We run some learning programs. The first one is Spark, which is literally what is entrepreneurship, and it's like, I've heard about it, but what actually might it look like? And we talk about real people, everyday people who engage in entrepreneurial action. And then we step that up, through Fuel, which is, I'm is the problem you want to solve a problem that's worth solving? So how do you know what else is out there and whether your piece will make a difference? And then Ignite is literally, if you're building a venture, then what are the pieces you have to have in play? And so all of that sits alongside the rest of the curriculum, but particularly in the business school, there is entrepreneurship in the management major. There's a entrepreneurship minor, which is available to anyone in the university who's got 4 units in their undergraduate program. There will be a new major in entrepreneurship from next year in the business school. We've just launched or about to launch a diploma of entrepreneurship through the QUT College. So that will be the college teaches in a different way. It takes in students who perhaps haven't quite made the ATAR for a degree. Sorry, that's me going off. And you can do a diploma in entrepreneurship, which is 4 units around entrepreneurship, around mindset and practice, with 4 discipline units that'll get you into one of 3 different degrees, give you advanced standing into a degree. So there's a lot of things there, but a lot of it is a lot of what we do as well is with staff generally across the university. Someone will come to us and say, well, we've been working with this industry client and students have come up with proposals, but they don't quite know how to pitch it. Can you work with us on pitching? What does pitching look like and how might they do it? So we'll do a bit of pitch training, or we'll talk, we've been in one of the science classes where the students are incredible, science, chemistry, biology, a whole range of different things. And it's around biotech innovation. So they're hot on the science part, but we're helping them understand what can you do with that science? What might it look like? And I've got to say, a few weeks ago, I went to listen to the pitches that the students made that produced videos. Oh my, it's like, these things are all possible with the science. They clearly don't exist. And so our job is then to say, how can we help you? What do you need to keep that idea moving along? And we find that in all sorts of classes across the university. Students do incredible work. They produce both physical and, other intellectual pieces of work. And then they put them aside, done that. That's my assessment, done that, moving on to the next bit. It's like, no, stop. You've put all this effort in, keep going. Let's see what we can make of it. So I'm a firm believer that entrepreneurship just amplifies what students are studying. And so I don't think it's a binary choice, go to uni or be an entrepreneur. I definitely think you can do both. And we actually give scholarships to recognise that. We take in students who have engaged in entrepreneurial action at high school. We give them a $24,000 scholarship that they can, they can spend it on lollies, they can spend it on their fees, or they can spend it on a venture. But I just want them to know that you can do both. It's hard, but we're there to help them.
I think that's really critical because we talk about how entrepreneurship is the vehicle for people to explore problems they care about and then find solutions that matter. And if you can find a solution that matters that also generates revenue, then, to say what you said earlier, Murray, you're also creating your own job, which is a really exciting space for you to operate in. I'm going to throw a question at you in a second, but I just want to let everybody know we've got about 5 minutes left. So if you've got a burning question inside you that you'd like for, any curly questions, I think we could definitely throw them their way. Feel free to drop them in the chat. On this binary polarization between entrepreneurship and education, I think the complexity at the moment for young people in trying to pick pathways is very real. like this sense of overwhelm. Like when I finish grade 12, I have to choose what I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And, you know, for those of us that are engaged in the research, we know that the average 12-year-old today is going to have 17 different jobs over 5 different careers. We know that it's not about what are you going to be when you grow up, but I love the reframe around what are you going to be next, you know, which is a really nice way to look at moving through life, collecting experiences and using those to catalyze next steps. I'll start with you, Murray. If you had a piece of advice for a senior student who's having to navigate that career education pressure pot at the moment, what advice would you give to that young person?
I'll say I had it a lot easier than you did, and everyone older than you had it easier than you do, so good luck. I'll also say there are so many more opportunities available to you today, which is obvious, but like that is a dynamic that you need to understand, that it's not about defined kind of career choices anymore. There's a pretty much infinite number of things you could be doing now in terms of problems you can solve and customers you can address in your own solutions that you develop. So in that world, no one's going to come up to you and say, here is what you should be doing. Choose from this list. It's up to you to have the initiative to figure out, I think I have a solution here. Here's what I'm going to do with it. We ran a survey end of last year of kind of 2,500 people across different parts of UTS to figure out what they're doing. 8.8% of the students reported currently running their own startup. So call that 9%, which if you look at it in total numbers, that would be the 3rd largest faculty of UTS in terms of School of Life, Entrepreneurship, Self-Education. Think of it like that, like it's not about what do I study, what can I do with this ATAR that I've got, I don't want to waste it, so I'm going to slot into one of these. It's the world is more diverse than that now, and you need to think about all the things that you could be figuring out for yourself and putting more focus on initiative.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Murray. Rowena, what would you say to year 12 you from that picture? Like if you could go back, what advice would you give?
Yeah, don't study physics. University physics is a lot different to high school physics. But I think what I would say to any student is just get started. In the past, we thought about university as an end point. We go through our schooling and we end up at university, and that's where we stop, and we've got our professional career from there, and there's the rest.
Then we're an adult.
Yeah, then we're an adult. Oh golly, gee, that didn't work then, did it, for me? It's not an end point anymore. You should go and come back and try and have another go at something. When I started my PhD, it was not on small firms and industrial relations. It was on something completely different. And I was 9 months in, and sobbing daily because it was so hideously hard that it took, probably took a particular person, and eventually I realized I don't have to do that. I can choose to do something else. And I did. And I, threw all that paper in the bin and I started again. This is the point about university. I was talking to a student the other day. He started studying engineering, and he's now in his 2nd year of law and fashion communications. It's an odd combination as a double anyway, but it's also a huge step from engineering to get to fashion communications and law. So you just get in and you have a go. And if it doesn't work out, talk to someone, and they will help you find a different path. But, that's the piece. And I think, as, Murray talks about as well, it's get involved, have a go. There's a lot more to uni than just going to class. In fact, there's a bucket load to uni beyond class. And a lot of that, as Nicole, you said, a lot of that is incredibly important. So That's where you get your friends, that's where you get your ideas, that's where you might find love, you might find all sorts, you might find all sorts of things, but you just need to get involved and get engaged, because that's when the world starts to open up.
So for everybody listening, QUT is the place to find love. I don't know if everybody knew, but this is Rowena's new tagline for getting involved at QUT is now the place to find love. I think it's really interesting to, I often reflect back on the thread of my career and sort of where I've ended up here. And in my 20s, I was able to identify one thing that brought me great joy. And I was working as a swimming coach in America. And I loved seeing young people do something that they didn't think they could do. That little moment where they go, this is impossible, I can't. And then they surprise themselves. And I think it's in that moment of surprise that they're changed forever, because their perceptions around their own potential are shattered just for a moment in time, which I think is critical. But in identifying that thing that I loved, I suddenly realized that there were all of these careers that were open to me that would deliver that same element of joy. So I got that joy out of seeing young people do that in swimming. And then when I was a classroom teacher, I got that joy out of teaching English and teaching PE, that moment of joy there. And then now in my work at Future Anything, I get it obviously in the workshops that we do, or running our national finals, and seeing these young people who are close to vomiting side of stage just walk out in front of 300 people and kill it, and then walk back and have this, complete look of shock and overwhelm and surprise on their face. And so I always think back when I look at people's lives, there's almost just this thread of joy that takes them, they're chasing the joy through careers. They find one thing that lights them up, and then, they stumble into the next thing and they find this new connection piece. And I wonder if we started to have these conversations with young people about just chasing that little bit of joy that lights you up, where they might end up next. I'd love to finish by throwing to you, if there's one book or podcast or meaty piece of research, on a Friday night over a glass of wine that you would sit down and dig into, where would you point people that would like to understand? And I think what's been critical to highlight is today we haven't been talking about entrepreneurship as an outcome. We've been talking about the entrepreneurial mindset as a process. And I think differentiating those two things in the conversation that we're having, I think is critical. So if you were going to push people in the direction to understand how they can, as Rowena said, see opportunities, and then even if you don't have the resources, find a way to make something happen. Or Murray, as you were talking about, almost use the degrees and the areas of discipline expertise that young people have in other segments of the university as catalysts to explore problems and solve them. What might be a podcast or a book or a piece of research or something interesting that you'd push people towards for them to have a listen, a read, or a look at?
I'll start. There was a book I read last year called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. And 4,000 weeks, do you know what 4,000 weeks represents?
You're going to tell me that's how long I've got until I die, aren't you? Which is going to make me feel like I'm really running out of time.
Well, that's right. It is the average lifespan of a human, 4,000 weeks. And so it's literally about the concept of time, but it's about choice and what you do. We're in a world that everyone's really busy and there's lots of things, but it's about stopping and thinking about your purpose and being mindful in the choices that you make. That's what I took from it. It's quite a nice little, nice easy read, but it starts to put things into perspective about slowing down and focusing on what's in front of you rather than what's possible, what might be, but what's in front of you and what are you going to do.
Adding to cart. So done. Murray. Yeah.
Just did exactly
did the same thing.
What
about you?
Business model. I don't know if anyone actually reads the books, but those conversations where you put it in your cart definitely happen. I would read anything you recommend, but that sounds fantastic. I used to recommend a lot of different books. I've pushed a little bit more now towards recommending people around here, and there's equivalents in other places. But there's a group on Facebook called Sydney Startups that has 25,000 people in it. And every day there's people asking questions, and there's kind of discussing different things. And so you get a lot of different perspectives on what entrepreneurs are doing and a kind of group knowledge that's contributed to it. I find that to be a nice way of tapping into a lot of people's experiences, because ultimately I think people, if it is an entrepreneurial path that they want to pursue, they need to learn from an entrepreneur that has worked with the enablers that they have. So the skills they have, the resources they have, where they are in the world, the networks they have, and has built the thing that they want to build, and they need to learn from that person. So Facebook groups, and there's large kind of regional ones for equivalent areas, are a great way of starting to tap into who that person might be if you can't find them already.
Oh, I love that. There is an equivalent group, Brisbane Startups, as well, that you can tap into. And I think that's, a really great way to start engaging in the conversation. For entrepreneurially-minded educators, we also have a Facebook group called Enterprising Educators as well. So for teachers that are interested in looking at how they can build this entrepreneurial mindset into their classroom practice, it's also a great community for teachers to share what's working, what's not, and, different events that are around the place as well. I want to close by just saying thank you. I think time is the most generous thing that we can offer people. So the fact that you've both carved out your time this afternoon to share your insights, your experience, and photos of you when you were younger, I think, which is a highlight for me. So on behalf of our community, thank you for sharing your time, your expertise. And we'll be sure to obviously post the video of this. And if people want to reach out and get in touch with you, we'll also sort of share where to get in contact with you both as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for the opportunity. And it was good to chat, Murray. We should do it again soon.
Yes, we don't do it enough, but it's been a pleasure. And thank you, Nicole, for bringing it together. I'll just say murray@uts.edu.au. So M-U-R-R-A-Y, and just email me. Thanks.
And Rowena's is Rowena@findloveatqut.edu. That's not true. I'll actually.
Damn.
There's a business in that.
I was about to say, if that URL is available, then I'm actually jumping on GoDaddy to pick that one up right now. I'll race you to it, Murray.
Okay, done.
Thanks so much, everyone. We will, for everybody who's registered to attend, we'll send you out the recording of this so that you can relive all the glory and Rowena's new, or actually it could be Murray and my new business venture, which is Find Love at QUT. But thanks so much. Have a great afternoon. Take care, look after each other, and look forward to seeing you in our next live learning session.
Thank you.